All right, let's dive into one of the wildest, most mind-bending chapters in our planet's entire history. We're going to talk about a time when Earth, our beautiful blue marble, might not have been blue at all, but a solid white snowball, frozen from pole to pole. So I want you to picture this. Imagine you could travel back in time, 700 million years, and look at Earth from space. You wouldn't see the swirling blue oceans and green continents we know. You'd just see white, a vast, stark, frozen sphere. Now, this isn't some sci-fi movie plot. It's a real scientific theory that has completely challenged what we thought we knew about our planet. So, where did this crazy idea even come from? Well, it all started with a puzzle. For decades, geologists were staring at evidence in ancient rocks that just seemed impossible. It was a mystery literally set in stone. And this mystery really gets going with some incredibly weird clues found in rock layers around the world. What they found was evidence for two climates that are polar opposites, sitting right on top of each other. Okay, so on the one hand, you have these carbonate rocks. Think limestone. These things only form in warm, shallow tropical waters, within about 30 degrees of the equator. They're basically a geological postcard from the Bahamas, a clear sign of a warm, sunny environment. But then, and this is the weird part, layered right there with the tropical rocks, geologists found this, glacial diamictites. This is the complete opposite. It's a chaotic jumble of rocks and dirt left behind by giant, grinding glaciers. An undeniable sign of freezing, polar-like cold. So you see the problem, right? How in the world do you get tropical beach rocks and glacier debris in the same exact spot? It's like finding a penguin and a parrot nesting together. It just shouldn't happen. And look, just in case you thought, well, maybe it was a fluke, scientists double-checked. They used something called paleomagnetic data, which can tell you the latitude where a rock formed millions of years ago. And the data from deposits in Australia confirmed it, no question. There were glaciers at sea level, practically on the equator. The mystery was very real. Okay, so with this impossible evidence staring them in the face, how did scientists first try to explain it? The first big idea was, well, maybe the climate wasn't weird. Maybe the Earth was weird. Maybe the whole planet was just tilted differently back then. This idea was called the high obliquity hypothesis. It's a pretty clever thought experiment. What if Earth's axis was tilted way over, by more than 54 degrees? If that happened, our whole climate system would flip on its head. The poles would get the most direct sun and become warm, while the equator would be left out in the cold, freezing over. It's a neat way to explain ice at the equator. But as elegant as that theory was, it just didn't hold up to scrutiny. First off, we don't know of any physical force that could have knocked the Earth over that dramatically. Second, if the poles were the warm spots, that's where you'd expect to find those carbonate rocks, but they were found at the equator. And the final nail in the coffin? Fossil studies of ancient microbes actually suggest Earth's tilt was pretty much the same as it is today. So the tilted axis theory was a bust, a total dead end. The puzzle of glaciers on the equator was still there, which meant that the real answer had to be something even more radical. And that brings us to the main event, the Snowball Earth hypothesis. This idea was formally laid out in a 1992 paper by a Caltech geologist named Joseph Kirschwink. And his proposal was breathtaking. It wasn't just the equator that froze, the entire planet froze solid. So you have to be asking, how could that possibly happen? Well, the theory goes something like this. It all started with the way the continents were arranged, mostly clustered around the equator. This made the planet more reflective, bouncing more sunlight back into space and kicking off a cooling trend. As the ice caps at the poles started to grow, they reflected even more sunlight, which made it even colder, which made the ice grow even more. You see where this is going? It's a runaway feedback loop that wouldn't stop until the whole planet was covered in ice. Okay, but wait a minute. That creates another huge problem. If the Earth turns into a perfect white snowball, it's basically a giant mirror, reflecting almost all of the sun's energy back into space. It's the ultimate deep freeze. So, how did it ever thaw out? Well, the escape plan came from inside the planet itself. All this time, volcanoes were still erupting, pumping out tons of carbon dioxide. Now, normally, that CO2 gets absorbed by the oceans and rocks. But with a thick sheet of ice covering everything, it acted like a lid. The CO2 had nowhere to go. So for millions of years, it just built up in the atmosphere until it reached insane levels, triggering a colossal hyper-greenhouse effect that finally, and probably very violently, melted the entire planet. Now, this whole freeze and fry story sounds pretty dramatic, I know, But the reason the Snowball Earth hypothesis really took hold is because it also solved another totally separate geological mystery, the weird reappearance of a very specific kind of rock. So think about what the oceans would have been like under all that ice. They would have been completely sealed off from the atmosphere. No wind, no waves, no currents. The water would have become stagnant and lost all its oxygen. And in this oxygen-free water, iron pouring out of volcanic vents on the seafloor couldn't rust. It just dissolved, building up and up for millions of years. Right. So when the Great Thaw finally happened, oxygen from the air could suddenly mix back into the oceans again. And when that oxygen hit all that dissolved iron, boom. The iron basically rusted all at once and rained out of the water, settling on the ocean floor in huge layers. These layers are what we call banded iron formations. And this was the smoking gun. As Kershving himself put it in his paper, the iron would oxidize to form a last gasp blanket of banded iron formation deposition. The snowball model didn't just explain this, it predicted it. It connected all the dots perfectly. But this story doesn't end with rocks and iron, because maybe the most profound consequence of this global catastrophe wasn't geological at all. It seems it may have completely rewritten the future of life on Earth. It really comes down to timing. The last big snowball event ends around 635 million years ago. And then, geologically speaking, right after that, we suddenly see the first fossils of large, complex, multicellular life. And that leads pretty directly into the Cambrian Explosion, this incredible burst of animal evolution. The timing isn't just a coincidence, it's a stunning correlation. And Kershving speculated on this very point. He wrote that these evolutionary changes were made possible by the glaciations. Basically, the deep freeze acted like a giant reset button for life on Earth. It created what he called a post-glacial sweepstakes, where the old rules were gone and totally new kinds of life could suddenly emerge and thrive. And that leaves us with a truly incredible, thought-provoking idea. Is it possible that the most severe climate crisis our planet has ever faced was the very thing that paved the way for complex animals and eventually for us? It suggests that sometimes, out of a global catastrophe, you get the creation of a whole new world.